I wanted to speak to my conversion from an atheist to a Christian, which surprised me. I was a vehement atheist for 20 years. I guess I'll start from the beginning. My grandmother was Orthodox. She took me to Orthodox church when I was a kid back in Russia. And Orthodox church is very interesting. My earliest memories of Christianity was witnessing a bunch of twisted old women standing in the dark, crying, and giving their last ruble to the priest who did God knows what with it. Orthodoxy in Russia is generally quite corrupt, so my experience of Christianity as a child wasn't great. I liked the tea and the little biscuits they would give out, so that was nice. But my grandma was into it. I used to know prayers off by heart. My mom never liked the church, so she never took me, and my dad was an atheist. When I was 7, I remember looking for a toy, and I couldn't find it, and it's one of my most vivid early memories. I got down on my knees, and there was a ray of light that shone right in the path that I was kneeling in. And I looked up and I prayed to God to help me find this toy that I was so desperate to play with and I couldn't locate. And I didn't find it. He didn't, in my mind, he didn't help an innocent child. And I became an atheist at the age of 6. I didn't even know what atheism was. I didn't have a word for it, but I stopped believing in God. And obviously, that was a very juvenile reason, and I will excuse myself since I was a juvenile. It goes back to the problem of evil, right? So how can God permit evil things to occur? Obviously, it doesn't exist. And I'll have to quote Ravi Zacharias on this one, because he puts it quite eloquently. A student asked him, how can God exist when there's so much evil in the world? And he responded, if there is evil, then we have to assume there's good. If there is good and evil, that means there is a objective moral law. If there's an objective moral law, there's an objective moral law giver, which is God. Now, if there's no God, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no evil or good. So what is the question? The other answer, of course, is free will. And free will in general creates evil. It's the result of our actions. You can also take it back to the Garden of Eden story, where Adam and Eve chose knowledge and chose to worship one side of God over the other, which would be, by the old Torah texts, there's Sakina, which is that knowledge part of God, versus life, which is the masculine, and knowledge, which is the feminine. And it goes much deeper than that. Anyways, I was an atheist for 20 years, and I studied atheism. I studied theology. I studied all the great thinkers, pre-Christian Flew, Hitchens, George Carlin, because fun. Hume, Voltaire, even though Voltaire wasn't strictly an atheist, Ayn Rand, Dawkins. I never got into Sam Harris because he's a bit of a napkin. He's too pompous to be a napkin. He's a handkerchief Harris. But yeah, I was into it. I even took philosophy of religion in university so I could know your enemy, if you will. And I was one of the only atheists in my class apart from my teacher. And looking back, there were some really sharp Catholics there, so kudos to them for standing up to the atheist teacher and myself. But yeah, I studied that for 3 years. I learned all the theology, I learned all the counter-arguments, and I loved it. I was always interested in it, even though I was an atheist. Stayed an atheist up until 3 years ago. And obviously I will talk about why I turned sides. Okay. There are some very obvious issues with the way an atheist, especially a naturalist atheist like Dawkins, sees the world. And it becomes very apparent when you sit down and actually think about it. So the first reason is the problem of origin. Nobody actually has solved this problem or even attempted in any real way to solve it. Darwin obviously couldn't do it. None of his work even begins to try and resolve origin. And that's only speaking to animals and living organisms. The origin of the universe, I mean, let's just get to the point. Multiple universe theory creates more problems than it solves. Some of the most intellectual people, including Stephen Hawking, did not have a competent explanation for origin. How does something come from nothing? Okay, Big Bang, where did the Big Bang come from? It's a huge issue. And a good atheist argument would be, well, just because you don't know where everything came from doesn't mean it had to be God. Yes, but that doesn't mean that you can just flippantly dismiss the idea of God because you have no idea. There is no explanation otherwise. So at best, you should be a agnostic, not an atheist, and keep it open because of the problem of origin. Second reason, and probably the most important to myself, is the problem of morality. You cannot have objective morality or objective system of ethics without a God. You cannot do it, because otherwise you have to have morality that stems from human law, human doctrine, human philosophy. And then which human? Why is let's say the NAP principle more valid than violent anarcho-communist principle of revolution? Why is the NAP even valid? And also, I will talk about the NAP. Anarchists, NCAP specifically, most of them seem to be atheistic, which is so funny because it's like God is water. They're so immersed in the benefits of Western thought that stems from Jesus and Christianity that they don't give it any credence or credit. The NAP is basically an Anabaptist principle. It comes from the radical interpretation of Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. So all that ANCAPs and libs did was put self-defense on top of the NAP principle, just like arbitrarily. If you read Tolstoy, one of the first Christian anarchists, and actually some of the first anarchists were Christians, Quakers, Anabaptists, Mennonites, they all fall under that umbrella. You should look up the history. They were really the first group of people, one of the first group of people to dismiss all human authority in any kind of real way. They chose to burn at the stake instead of bow down to someone. So they are hardcore. The thing is, they take the NAP completely literally. They do not even believe in self-defense. The way Tolstoy puts it is non-resistance to evil by force. So they don't believe. This is where it gets tricky, why I can't go full Anabaptist, because I still do believe in self-defense. And I actually think Christ's teachings include permission of self-defense. There's some parts of the Bible that state this. He told Paul to carry a sword, and a lot of the meek will inherit the earth is misinterpreted. Meek means a war horse seasoned for battle. That doesn't sound like being against self-defense to me. And turn the other cheek it's highly misinterpreted. It's not take abuse from an abuser. It's actually bring yourself up to the level of the person who is insulting you. Because if you turn the other cheek, then you're not getting backhanded. You're getting a slap as though you are an equal. Whereas what he was talking about was when people would slap a Jew, like a Roman would slap a Jew, they would use a backhand as though they were a slave. So turning the other cheek is actually equalizing yourself to your aggressor. So that's just a quick thing on that. I'm not going to go too deeply into it. But yeah, guys, ANCAPs, you gotta at least give credit to the Anabaptists for a lot of the beliefs that you hold dear. And Christian anarchists were some of the first people to completely denounce government and authority from man. Tolstoy was actually the one who influenced Gandhi into his peaceful revolution. So that's just a fun fact for you guys. Third reason, which, half of you will like dismiss this, but when I had my son, I'm such a woman, I can't even not cry when I think about the birth of my son. Anyways, when I held him in my arms and I looked into his eyes, I saw the image of God. It's not chance, he's not a cluster of cells that happened here by accident. Chance doesn't exist, by the way, it's just the human failure to measure. Just think about it. How is it that the world is created and all the laws of physics spontaneously work in coherence with each other? They are highly complex systems and laws, and they all just, fit together perfectly. Was that chance? It feels improbable, impossible even. I'm not a huge fan of argument from authority, but it is interesting and quite telling when people like Schrödinger and Einstein come to conclusions that include the possibility of God. They completely dismiss positivism, and positivism is basically where the burden of proof falls on the person who is making the claim. It's just a semantical argument, by the way. So an atheist could say God doesn't exist, and that's a claim, and now you have to prove it. It's just a semantic argument. I'll read an Einstein quote. "I'm not a positivist. Positivism states that what cannot be observed does not exist. This concept is scientifically indefensible, for it is impossible to make a valid affirmation of what people can or cannot observe. One would have to say only what we observe exists, which is obviously false." Yeah, so there we go. Quantum physicists doubt a lot of our assumptions about the world from a naturalist perspective. I could go on and on. So, yeah, before you feel super smart, look to the smart people who actually study these fields. And when they have doubts about how our world came to be and how it works from the scientific perspective, then at least think about it. Okay, so then why Christianity? Why not Islam or Judaism? And I'm not gonna even include polytheistic religions because they're pretty nonsensical to me. So anyways, Islam and Judaism and Christianity all worship the same God in theory, but it's different manifestations of that God through their religion. So obviously Judaism doesn't believe that Christ was the Son of God, neither does Islam. They do acknowledge that he existed and that he was a prophet, but not that he was actually holy. What I like about Christianity is Jesus. And it's very interesting to me that, just some guy, just another guy that they crucified ended up shaping the entire belief system and structure and development of the Western world through non-aggression. Muhammad had to aggress and fight a giant war to gain power and support. That's very different. I have a wonderful quote from Napoleon about Jesus. It's a little long, but bear with me, it's worth it. "Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and myself have founded great empires, but upon what did these creations of our genius depend? Upon force. Jesus alone founded his empire upon love, and to this very day millions will die for him. I think I understand something of human nature, and I tell you, all these were men, and I am a man. None else is like him. Him, Jesus Christ, was more than a man. I have inspired multitudes with such an enthusiastic devotion that they would have died for me. But to do this was necessary that I should be visibly present with the electric influence of my looks, my words, of my voice. When I saw men and spoke to them, I lighted up the flame of self-devotion in their hearts. Christ alone has succeeded in so raising the mind of men towards the unseen that it becomes insensible to the barriers of time and space. Across a chasm of 1800 years, Jesus Christ makes a demand which is beyond all others difficult to satisfy. He asks for that which a philosopher may only seek in vain at the hands of his friends, or a father of his children, or a bride of her spouse, or a man of his brother. He asks for the human heart. This phenomena is unaccountable. It is altogether beyond the scope of man's creative powers. Time, the great destroyer, is powerless in extinguishing the sacred flame. This is which proves to me quite convincingly the divinity of Jesus Christ. How does a dude do that if he's just human? I mean, what, is it chance? It's just perplexing to me. And considering that the witnesses of his divinity were women, 3 women who didn't have legal rights, who couldn't even speak in court, who couldn't bear witness. They were the witnesses of his rising, and so how did people believe them? Why? If someone was a charlatan, wouldn't they pick, like, some sort of high status Roman or high status Jew to proclaim his divinity instead of 3 women? So where exactly am I at now? I like Anabaptists because they don't believe in a church. They call their places of worship meeting houses. It's very anti-authoritarian. And I dig that. Like I said, I have trouble with their complete non-aggression. I believe in self-defense. They take it to the very, very lengths of extreme. Like if your child is being murdered in front of you, you can't use force to defend them. It's too much for me. I'm not a pacifist. I cannot fully accept that. And like I stated, I don't think Jesus's doctrine really supports that to that extreme. But if I had to choose a denomination, it would be Anabaptism, because it's the closest. They also do cool things like baptizing, being baptized when you're an adult, just like Jesus was baptized, because that is your choice. You're making a willing, conscious decision about your Christianity and your devotion to God. And there's a lot of corruption in organized religion, which often, dwells in churches. So I think church is a great place for community, to meet people, to interact, and to do charitable work. Other than that, I don't need a church to be close to my Creator. Anything else? Let's see. I also don't believe in heaven and hell in the evangelical tradition. That's actually misinterpreted from Plato and it's a one short story that he wrote. So there's actually not much in the Bible about dying and going to heaven right away. If you want to listen to an interesting guy on this, he's a historian and a great New Testament scholar. His name is N.T Wright with a W. And he talks about how in the Old Testament there's 2 words for death, and it's very easy to misinterpret what happens to you once you die, but the basic belief is you die and you rot in the ground until the second coming. There's no such thing as heaven right now until the kingdom of heaven is created due to our actions, from what I understand. That is my general belief. We are here to create the kingdom of heaven, and once we get to that place, then all of the dead that were part of that creation will rise, and that is when heaven will exist. So there's no cop-out. I don't think, I don't want to, some Christians, not all of them, have this idea, oh, if I'm just not a bad person, I'll just exit this awful life, which is hell on earth, and I will go to heaven, it'll be great, or grandma's in heaven now, she's looking down on you. Nope, that's not really accurate if you read the Bible properly. In general, being a Christian kind of sucks. You constantly feel ostracized and doubted. And I used to be one of those people. I was a vehement atheist for most of my life. And I get it, but it kind of sucks to be on the other side now. I do feel like we're a discriminated class, and we just take it because Christians are generally non-aggressive. It's also a daily struggle to actually believe that people are here to do something and that there's a reason why we exist. Being nihilistic is a lot easier. Nothing I do matters, so who cares? I'll just enjoy myself. That is not what Christianity is about, and my life has gotten mentally and spiritually a lot more difficult since I turned. I'm a very analytical person. I was never spiritual. A lot of atheists get all, airy-fairy about nature and yoga and all that, and the stars. Not me, still not like that. Very difficult for me to have a personal relationship with Jesus, which is like the cornerstone of what I claim to believe in. So yeah, please don't think like this was an easy choice for me or something I opted into to have a better life, because like my life is not better since I became a Christian in that sense. Obviously overall it is, because I feel like it is the truth, and I feel like I'm working towards something. And I want to end on this point. A lot of people, political people, especially from my old community, NCAPs and Libs, they dismiss belief, religious belief. They dismiss a lot of things. They kind of, they're backseat philosophers, and they don't actually do much with their life. Whether you believe in God or not, you have to build a foundation. Like, you can't have an NCAP utopia, which I know is not going to be utopia, but you can't have a new system without a foundation of ethics. Where your ethics going to come from? All right, if they're not going to come from God, if you're going to be adamant about that, good luck. But if they're not going to, they're going to come from the new generation of people that have to think in a different way. Who's raising those people? Do you have a family? Are you working towards that? Do you have the monetary foundation to enact societal change from the ground up? Or are you a little naive? That's all. I hope you enjoyed that. I don't read comments, but you can hit me up on Twitter at BraveTheWorld. Oh, speaking of Twitter, before I was a Christian, or before I did any of my YouTube stuff, I had Twitter, and my little blurb always said, "I write state with a capital S because it has become our God," which to me was a comment on, the apotheosis of the state and it replacing religion, and it's being elevated to the status of an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being. And that is what has happened, but I kind of missed my own point until recently, or obviously totalitarian and even not so totalitarian states in general cannot exist and function smoothly and do what they will with a populace that fundamentally believes in an authority above them. And that is religion, that is God, and especially the Christian God. Take care, and I'm not here to convince you, but I hope I convinced you that you are convincing yourself, even if you're an atheist. So think twice. Take care.